Welcome to Layers Licensing in Games podcast. I'm Mitch and this is Ratchet, and today we're pleased to be joined by Rebecca Danta from On-Chain Studios. Based in Miami, Rebecca has been head of partnerships at On-Chain for about 7 months after previously being managing director at Miami Angels, which is an early stage investment fund for angel investors. On-Chain Studios launched their flagship product last year, which is Cryptoys. And Cryptoys is an NFT-native digital platform crafting fully interactive collectibles, play-to-earn games, and next-level interactive experiences. Welcome, Rebecca, and hopefully I've got the description of Cryptoys right.
You did. I can definitely, I like to simplify it for people too by just saying we're a digital toy company. But with that said, it's great to be here.
That's a great description. Much easier than the mouthful I just used.
Yeah.
So tell us about Cryptoys. It's one of the most unique projects in the Web3 and NFT space. So maybe if you could just start by telling us, how did it start? How's it going? And then also maybe if you could explain how it differs from some of the other NFT projects that people might be familiar with.
Yeah, so actually, I think something that does make it so unique is the way that it came to be. So we have 5 co-founders at this company, and 3 of the 5 had built another company before. They had sold it. They were working at the company that acquired them. And Will, our CEO, likes to say how one day he was upstairs in his office working, and he hears his daughter yell from the playroom, "Dad, I got the Ultra Grail." And he's like, "What?" And he goes down, and if any of you have kids, you may have heard of LOL Surprise Dolls, like the biggest like hottest toy trend in the toy industry. So he says that she's like all the excitement, "Oh my gosh, I got the Ultra Grail." And about 5 minutes later, she throws it in the toy bin. And he's like, "I've spent over $1,000 on these things and you're not even playing with them." So he says that around then was when Crypto Kitties came out. This was back in 2017. So he started seeing how like you can fuse the two. So like a really cool unboxing experience and appeal, but a toy that's actually fun to play with. And then one that you can actually own as well. The trend nowadays is if any of us are around young kids today, we see how a lot of their play patterns are playing with other kids, like video games, like Roblox, and then they constantly want like digital money to spend in these games. So we said, what if we create something where they can actually own the product, unlike the digital games today? And that is how Cryptoys came to be. And we did launch in 2021. But we actually just just dropped our first wave of characters in November. And we really took the time to do it. And again, that's because we're not another NFT project. We weren't just trying to ride the wave and the craze of 2021. We could have just thrown something out quickly last year, but we didn't want to do that. Like, this is a generational company, and going back to our founding story, Will jokes around that his goal is that his daughter one day becomes CEO. So
that's super cool. I'd love to understand that more, and like just to help understand like that space or that divide, I guess, which people might have in their heads, right? It's like this Web3 kind of NFT space is often a little bit older, a bit more kind of like tech focused. And I guess the toy space people generally think of as a little bit younger, right? So like, what does that look like, and how do you actually go through that process? Like, firstly, getting the right people into the space, but also like, who are the right people? Like, what's your audience look like? Who are the people that are interested in Cryptoys? Where are they based? Like, what kind of ages? Like, what's that in general?
Yeah. So Cryptoys is a whole family entertainment platform. So it's very much for adults and kids, the similar way that like we as adults love watching Disney movies, and of course so do our kids. There's some platforms that are very much kid focused, like as an adult you could never watch it or enjoy watching it. The idea is that Cryptoys is for all ages. And there's a few things in our product, like the fact that our video games are going to be mini games. And if you look at the age demographic of mini game players across the globe, it's really all ages. Kids play, and so do adults. So that's why we're going that route with video games. But then our first drop with Mattel, our first licensing partner, is Masters of the Universe. And Masters of the Universe is a very nostalgic IP. And we went with that one first because our group today are adults. We're going through everything to be compliant for children. So we actually don't allow kids on our platform yet. But the idea is that we have these IPs that adults loved as when they were kids, and then they can get to show it to their children. And it's been just so fun to see the unboxing experiences and like the parents just bringing their kid and like, come sit with me and look, that's He-Man, and getting to show them that, and kids learning about Masters of the Universe for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about Cryptoys when I first came across you guys is like the fact that it does kind of transcend generations. It's not like, Cocomelon where it's like a 2-year-old can enjoy it, but mum and dad probably find it quite annoying. So
That's exactly what I was thinking about. I didn't want
to. Yeah, you're not going to have any like JJ drops in Cryptoys, are you? Baby JJ.
Yeah.
So you
one day.
You touched on it a bit there. You did your first branded NFT drop recently with Masters of the Universe. So users can purchase He-Man, She-Ra, all these really awesome nostalgic IPs. So I think you kind of touched on it then. Why did you start with Masters of the Universe? Like, what made you want to go with that IP as your first NFT drop?
Yeah, so Mattel is a huge household name brand, rich with IP. And we decided to go for that one exactly for the reason I mentioned before. While we can't have kids on our platform, we're really going with these nostalgic plays because it's bringing in the adults, and our idea is that the adults become Cryptoys fans and users, and then they bring their kids into it as well once we're ready to have kids onto the platform.
And what?
Gotcha.
What was that experience like working with Mattel? It's such a huge brand. It's a pretty big project for the first partnership. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason Mattel is one of the biggest toy companies in the world is because they're not afraid of innovation. So we knew from the very beginning that they were the right partner for us because they really wanted to lean into that. They said, we're not going to like bury our heads. We see the way play patterns are changing in younger generations, and they thought we were the perfect partner for that. So because that's the way they are, they're the perfect partner for us. And they've been wonderful to work with and a huge support, really excited about what they're doing, and they give us a lot of creative freedom with it too.
It seems that someone like Mattel, or I guess any licensed IP, fits almost perfectly into Cryptoys. Was that always in mind that you wanted to work with beloved brands or characters or other entertainment properties? And why is that important, and like how is that important for you versus creating your own set or your own I guess line of characters or IP?
Yeah, so the question's how we choose licensing.
Well, it's more like is that space important to you overall, and has that always been a fundamental part of Cryptoys in that working with external partners is the key to kind of how you do this, or would you consider doing this yourself and without those external partners as well?
Okay, understood. Yes, so that is a major key to our platform, is bringing in household name IP. So our idea is that it's a new way for fans to interact with brands that they love on our platform. And it's very much, we have our own original IP as well, though. I think that was your second question, like why not do it on our own? Well, we are. So that's why also it's really important that any partner is wanting to come into the Cryptoyverse. because it's not a world we're creating only for partner where Cryptoys doesn't exist. It's all about mixing that together in the same way that kids mix they mix Captain America and Barbie in the real world as well. They don't think about that. So we're trying to create the first environment that exists in the digital world that truly mimics physical play and takes it to the next level because it's something that you can truly
Cool. So I guess brands are pretty important for what you do then. Your experience working with brands is quite different from other game developers we've spoken to on this podcast, where they're often working with an IP, creating a game from scratch. And I guess, you're creating an NFT from scratch. It's not entirely different, but you're integrating more IP consistently into an existing universe. So what's your approach been to developing a pipeline of brands that you think are a good fit for the Cryptoverse? How do you decide who to go after? How often are you going after those brands? Is there kind of a roadmap for brands you want to bring in? And then how do you reach them and actually get the deal done?
Yeah, so things that qualify brands that we'd want to go after. So they need to be a household name. Household names have a magnetic pull. Their fans are like very active fans, right? That'll go wherever that brand goes, and thus grow the Cryptoverse as well. So that's one of it. And then the second thing is that it needs to be a family friendly brand. So we can't have adult only. It needs to be like kid approved content as well and kid safe content. That's really important for us. And to your earlier question, you asked about like, oh, people think crypto and kids. There's kind of that idea out there today because the IP that exists, the Web3 IP that exists, is not kid friendly. But there's no reason that crypto should be something kids that's scary for kids. So we're trying to be the first to market to really change that and have a safe environment. And having that safe environment means really where parents can come in and control it. It's not going to be Wild Wild West where kids are coming in and doing anything they want on our platform unsupervised. So we're working with the best partners in the business to have a really safe environment and fun environment for kids. Or in our mission statement, we say part of Cryptoys and On-Chain Studios, our parent company, is not only to educate but to entertain. So everything has to be fun. And that's partly why we took so long to launch. Like if you look at our unboxing experience, like it's like a feast for all the senses. And that type of product, that quality that went into it, like our art team is amazing. That takes time. So when you ask about our roadmap for partners and all of that, we, like I said, I shared like some of the qualifiers, but at the same time, we want to build everything with the highest possible quality. So we're not necessarily going after quantity and wanting to work with everyone right now. We want to work with some big name partners. Luckily, we have a ton of interest, and we're selecting the ones that are the right ones for us and making sure that we can put the time to create an incredible product for the fans. We're building for fans because we're fans ourselves.
Have you got any criteria that others can learn from there? Like, I mean, I know you mentioned obviously in your space, family friendly is important. A large brand in general is important, but are there like specific criteria that you kind of like weigh things up with, or like even figure out, this is how many fans they have to, and we think we'll be able to launch in a certain way, or this will be worth that license because we know we can, attract a large enough player base. Like any kind of main criteria that you're always thinking of that, anyone else could learn from as well in the I guess the game space?
So we have our internal product roadmap. And while I can't share all the details there, once they've kind of met those qualifiers, we look at timing. So by second half of next year, what are going to be the capabilities on our platform and which IP will fit into that really well? That's That's what we look at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it could even tie to other games. It's like, what are we releasing, and like whether it's not it might not be a capability, but it might be like, hey, what's that game or world going to look like? What actually ties in via narrative or thematics, where like that IP actually makes sense to bring in there. So that's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have a crawl, walk, run approach to everything we do with partners. So there's different layers that we're building over time as we're a new company.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? Like crawl, walk, run. Like, how do you, without giving away any of the kind of secret sauce or anything you shouldn't speak about publicly, like how do you approach that from a brand's perspective? Because I think we hear that all the time with what we do. It's like, how do we actually evaluate the IP and make sure that it's going to be a good fit without investing too much and taking on all that risk? So how do you approach that?
Well, we do extensive research. I say that because it's partly really fun. Like, well, if it's a movie, we'll watch it. If it's a cartoon, we look at fan websites to see what the fans are saying about it. It's a lot of that. And then it's talking to the partner, making sure they understand what the Cryptoyverse is like and what we're aiming to do. Not just today, but in 3-5 years from now and more, and making sure that they are on board with that.
Okay. And you said you have a lot of partners who reach out to you. So you get a lot of interest inbound, which I guess is kind of unique in the sense that a lot of developers we speak to are often going out and pitching IP to bring their IP into their game. So if you could talk about a little bit about how you actually like reach brands and get the deal done, I think that would be helpful for any developers listening as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if you consider it large or small, but for a startup, we're 56 employees, which I would say is pretty big. So we've raised 2 rounds of venture capital. I would say we're fortunate to have really good investors. And I think that's given Cryptoys a leg up in the space. We get introductions from our investors, and also it's just like really helped grown our network and our notoriety. So between the network that we have at Cryptoys, we often get warm introductions from partners that we want to go after. And I think that if you can get a warm introduction, like in any sector, it goes so much further.
Yeah. So the key lesson there is raise more money and get lots of warm intros, and you'll be fine. No, I kid. I kid.
I think be smart about the space, but to your point, it's like, if you have the opportunity, think about who. Sometimes you're not in a situation where you can choose, but I worked in venture capital before this, and now being on the operating side, I absolutely see the difference and the benefit of having value-added investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, I guess, around the kind of like volume of integrations that you want to do NFT drops. How do you manage that internally across different teams? I know for a startup, 56 employees, you've got the benefit of some resources there, but I think one of the challenges for any developer when you're bringing IP into an existing world, whether it's a game, whether it's a metaverse, whatever it is like, how do you manage that across teams? You've got the partnerships or the biz dev team yourself going out and doing these deals. Then you've got the product team. Then you've got the exec team who wants one thing. You got engineers who say we can or can't do this. Like, what's your approach to managing all of that internally?
Communicate ahead of time. Partnerships is a really cool role, and partnership in all organizations is different, but here I mainly focus on licensed partnerships. So I do work across a ton of teams. So for companies who are listening, the advice I have is like, make sure that role is really the glue that's tying all the teams together, and that any hires on that team are great communicators. people need to know with time. You need to get sign off from different employees. Yeah, communication.
I'd love to switch gears a little bit and understand your thoughts, or get your thoughts around, like, maybe even on the brand side, or like the other side, and how they see this space. I think a lot of people have seen, both in Web3, but also other kind of more like open world platforms or environments like Sandbox or Roblox even, that, you know, there are people working with brands and IP, and I think you're starting to do, you know, you're doing the same in a really cool way. What do you think drives the trend, and, like, you know, do you think the trend is here to stay, and what are you hearing from the other side, I guess? Like, what's the feedback that you're kind of hearing around how they're thinking about the market going forward?
Yeah, so the question is, like, what are brands still continuing to move forward even in the bear market?
Well, yeah, that too. And, like, you know, how do you think they actually approach this whole space of, like, whether that's NFTs or whether that's games and kind of metaverses like Roblox as well, which are not necessarily kind of as impacted by, say, like a crypto bear market?
Yeah, so I think overall brands probably see licensing opportunities as a way for them to test some like Web3 NFT integrations and initiatives and see how their own audience is reacting to it and whatnot. It's like a relatively safe and risk-free way for them to enter, right? So it shows that they're still being relevant, without kind of switching their overall, like deviating from their company strategy. So I think a lot of brands are really interested in licensing opportunities because of that. Um, as far as what brands are saying lately, like I I always say I'm very bullish on Web3, and that's because I get to interact regularly with some of the biggest brands, and they are not phased by the crypto winter. I think they very much see this as a long term play. We've been through multiple crypto winters. This is another one. I think that's how they see it.
Yeah, do you have any advice for Web3 developers that, I guess, you know, sometimes we hear from some brands or licensors where they're not hesitant, but they're just kind of, you know, they're putting things, you know, they're turning the heat to low. They're you know, really assessing opportunities, and want to make the right moves, which I think is important. Like, what do you think is important for a Web3 developer, especially when they're pitching a brand or an IP to be successful in landing that deal, or like getting them to understand, you know, this new thing that they might be making?
Yeah, and so I say, like, I'm bullish brands aren't stopping, but you also have to be aware of the market that we're in. So, you know, it's not necessarily realistic that you're going to sell a $200 PFP, a 100K collection, and sell it out. Like, that's just not happening in this market. So you do need to make those adjustments. But so I would say that that's my biggest advice. Like, raise capital, have runway, hire smart, be fiscally responsible, because we don't know how long we're going to be in here. But there's still capital out there. Good companies are still getting funded.
Yeah, cool. No, totally. It's still a huge market, right? And it's a market that, while it's early, like, the growth is still, there's still a lot of growth potential there, and we're still very, very early in terms of adoption. So if you can really land and kind of plant that flag early, I think there's a strong opportunity there to make the most of something that, you know, is only going to have more and more users likely to come in.
Yeah, and there was so much fluff in the market. Like, everything that's happened over the last few weeks hasn't been great for segment. But I also think, like, when there's so much fluff and froth, it's not good either. So I think, like, some of that has been cleared out, and the people who are still here, the ones who are serious about it, who are building, and hopefully that can help the, like, crypto and Web3 reputation.
Yeah, totally. I think all the random, like, shill projects are kind of like drying up, which is really good for the market, and especially in how it matures. And you've got real builders and real kind of projects where they're building really cool experiences that actually take advantage of the space and the tech. So yeah, very much agreed with you, and we're seeing that as well. So really cool to hear that.
Yeah, and I think NFTs are maturing as well. Like we're seeing them called digital collectibles. You've probably heard how people say like when you're talking about a web page, we don't say like the HTTPS protocol. It's really similar with right.
Yeah.
Before it was almost like the cool thing was that it was an NFT, and
Yeah.
now partly because of the market we're in and people aren't just spending whatever. It's not just oh I bought an NFT. Who cares what it is? It's there. What's the value? It's good that it's being looked at more with a critical eye, I think.
Yeah.
And while our name is Cryptoys, I think we think of ourselves probably less as an NFT company, certainly not an NFT project, than one would think. Because to us, we're building digital toys, and Web3 and the blockchain is what enables ownership. But that's like a secondary kind of side thing. We're trying to build an amazing universe environment that is just fun to play with. And to us, success is that people come on our platform and they're not so much focused on I bought an NFT or what's this worth or whatnot. It's just I love this toy and I own it and I get to look at it, I get to play with it.
I think that's really smart. It changes the focus of like everything from being for the like speculative like technology investor to the actual like fan or the player who doesn't care about that, probably, right? It's like what's the experience we can build here? And I think that's a really good reminder to everyone in this space, especially when they're working with brands and IP. It's like it has to be for the fan, it has to be for the audience. If it doesn't make sense and it's just because of the technology, it's unlikely to be the best application of that kind of existing audience that they're trying to tap into. So that's really cool.
Particularly as it comes to brands and IP, like they see this as a very much a long-term play. There's almost like some parallels there to the .com boom of the early 2000s where there was like a lot of fluff and a lot of like not valuable projects. And I think like this kind of helps shake out some of those. But do you think for both sides of the equation, for Web3 developers, also for the IP side, is there kind of a first mover advantage here for, getting brands into games, or if you want to be a successful Web3 project, to kind of get in the space and be in it for the long haul?
Yeah, and I think like look at the NBA and Top Shot. They get a ton of credit for what they did there. And the NBA is really seen as kind of like an innovator in the space. They've done things well. So I think there is something to be said for that. And Dapper Labs and Top Shot as well. Really because we're building on flow. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, I guess like would love to get final closing thoughts around the space in general, because yeah, we've seen these kind of interesting projects that people do know of, like Cryptoys is definitely one of them. But as you mentioned, early on in the piece, it was also Dapper Labs, Top Shot, like that kind of stuff. Like, what do you think is next in terms of like where this industry is going on both sides, for Web3 and NFTs and blockchain in general? As you said, the technology matters less, but I think I'm curious to understand, like, how do you think brands and IP and licenses and, pop culture will evolve and interact in this space over the coming years?
Yeah. Where it's going and like this one comment I'll make, it goes back to something that Mitch just mentioned, but like the whole cash grab behind it is like there's been a few license or handful of license partnerships that haven't gone well because they were perceived as cash grabs by the fans.
Right.
So that's like something else that we look for with partners. We want to see like, are they also going to be marketing this, or is it just their IP and they're kind of in the dark? Like what is that, and what does that say to their fan base if they're not willing to like publicly come out and talk about this product? So that's something that we absolutely look for in partners. And then I think that's important just for the brand and the IP side. And then I've seen brands get flack too when they like are being seen as a cash grab when they have like when they're just not in sync with the market, right? So right now, for example, market creator fees, the trend is that they're being lowered. So when it comes to artists, that's not a great thing. But when it comes to like IP holders, in some cases, like these big brands, they're getting in trouble for slapping on like really big fees. So I think like brands they need to have a pulse on the market and be aware of how those type of things are going to be received. But as to where things are going, I think user experience, I think a lot of people are kind of heads down building because they're not so much shipping product right now. And I think that this next wave, we're going to see way better user experience overall in Web3. And then I think one of the bigger things too is what we talked about earlier, that we're going to see a shift away from NFT, more toward digital collectible and what you can do with it. Because I think people now are sitting there and like, wait, I spent all this money on a static image, and people aren't going to want to do that the second time around.
Yeah, totally. It'll be really interesting to see the evolution of utility, right? It's, a lot of these, as you say, like a static image, were kind of speculative bets on like that thing will do something or will grant me utility in the future in some way. And, in some cases that hasn't transpired. And I think, these projects like Cryptoys, where you're kind of running, with the point of the experience and kind of what you're building from day one being really important, I think you've got a much better chance of the fan or the purchaser actually getting a real value out of it and really being happy with their purchase as well. And then you get ecosystems which can facilitate more sale and kind of transactions between them as well. So really, really cool.
Yeah. And I almost like avoid that word because it's such a buzzword, right? What's the utility? Or we need to focus on utility. And it's like the fact that we're even asking that shows how so much NFT projects are.
I think people also forget entertainment is a form, is a utility as well, right? If you can get people in and they enjoy it and they find play there, that's cool. That is utility as well. It doesn't always have to be, I guess the most utilitarian form of the word utility of like trying to achieve a greater goal. Like it can be the way you spend your time and that you enjoy spending time in the same way that you do with toys. So that makes sense.
Well, actually, just quickly, what are your plans for working with brands and IP moving forward? I mean, you've made it quite clear today that it's like a huge key part of your strategy. So, is there anything you can tell us about that's coming up, or is it all kind of hush-hush at the moment?
Mattel represents a lot of brands, so we have some exciting stuff in the works there. And we're really finalizing our 2023 and 2024 roadmap. And I say, like, as a startup, I feel so fortunate that we have enough interest that we can kind of plan out over the next 2 years. But yeah, that's where we're at. So, and when I say roadmap, I mean like all different partners.
Great. Look forward to it. Amazing. Well, can't wait to see what you do next. Really grateful you were able to come on today. Some really interesting insights into the Web3 space and digital collectibles. We won't call them NFTs anymore. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun to talk about all things licensing and Web3 with you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks for watching the Licensing and Games video series. For more content like this, subscribe to our channel or check us out at layerlicensing.com.